Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Just Live podcast. The today is January 30th, 2026. All right. So I'm anxious to get to February in hopes that it starts warming up around here. I'm a little early again because I've got to go and take care of some other things here shortly while it's still warm outside. Okay, so the Friday podcast live starts right now. And today, what I want to talk about is issues, as usual, if I were running for governor, and then what the legislative body is up to. And remember, with the legislature, the state senate is not in session yet, so it's just the House of Representatives. So that's why the information's been a little bit weak toward them, since it's just bills are just going into committee, and then eventually, once the Senate gets back, they'll start passing things, and then we will see what happens. Okay, so I did a search on who in Illinois the tax burden is on. And as I've told you before, um, the system of the flat tax on income, the high property taxes, all of that stuff are considerations if someone is running for governor. And I keep saying that people running for governor of Illinois need to be talking only about community taxing. Okay, so income tax. Every resident and most non-residents working in Illinois pay a flat income tax rate of 4.9%. We knew that. Now look at the wording, most non-residents. Now that's important because I'm not sure how they are tracking things, even though in this case, I would lead that, talk about that as far as people being in the state that we don't know what their status is in general. Normally, what that could mean is that people working in one of the neighboring states, and I read that there are agreements where people from a neighboring state wouldn't be paying income tax in this state. So, but the tracking mechanism is what I wanted to focus on, because how do we know that, especially if people are in the state and we don't know their status in general? Okay, so income brackets. Households earning between 100,000 to 500,000 carry the largest share of the income tax bill in Illinois. Okay, so in this part of Illinois, the Metro East, there are people with high salaries here. And I would say that's a pretty good percentage because there are really nice, good paying jobs here. They have the bulk of getting taxed, and Chicago, of course. Um, I would have to look and see um, if they are even tracking the metrics of um, people and income, how much people are making, what part of the state they're in, etc. But if I were running for governor, I think that that's too high because it puts an unfair burden on them when they are not the majority in the state of Illinois. I would say, with just looking at driving around the state, etc., and then feedback from local affiliates, TV affiliates, of what economically is going on in the state. And also in Illinois, we have a lot of rural areas and farm areas. So I'm not sure how true that is. Undocumented immigrants. A 2024 report found that undocumented immigrants were paying taxes. Now, I read the whole information, but I wanted to give you the first part of this because I don't believe that they are tracking that accurately. If you're here undocumented, how would you know that they're undocumented? Because the local and state laws support them not having to divulge their statuses in the first place. And also read that they were forecasting and stuff like that. If I were running for governor of Illinois, I would be highlighting that from the perspective of if they are, if folks are here, they need to pay taxes. And employers need to be making sure that they're giving them benefits as well. And this is a way to actually lessen the impact on taxpayers in Illinoisans on uh, state taxes for the benefits that folks are getting. That's something that a governor could head up and get studies done on so that we can identify them, because it could be that employers are not requiring whoever's working for them to pay any kind of taxes, because if they're not doing the paperwork, like I say, how would we know in the first place? All right, like I've previously said, property taxes, and I can't foot stomp this more than 30 times, but I probably will. Illinois has some of the highest property taxes in the US, often ranked second or third nationally. These are local taxes used primarily, they say, to fund school districts, police, and fire services. Now, in other things that I read, they are also saying that it's used for undocumented folks too when we don't know their status. Again, how would they know if they're not tracking it in the first place? And the high property taxes, as I've told you previously, if I'm running for governor, we need to freeze that. We need to do an audit to figure out how much money is going where, and maybe look at a different way to get revenue. All right. Now, they also have what they call a regressive impact. All right. So the income tax is flat. Lower income families often pay a higher percentage of the total towards sales and excise taxes. Okay. So the reason for that is that everyone buys stuff in the state. And I would submit to you that's why you want to get rid of the personal income tax, because people who are working are paying the income tax, the state income tax, and they're also paying taxes on sales and excise taxes and all of that stuff. So if you get rid of that personal income tax, everybody is taxed uh, equally. And then you look at the percentage based on um, how much the state is in debt. Because remember, the state is going to be, there's no state running a surplus. The difference is state have less obligations. So you're never going to be at zero or running a surplus. Okay. Businesses and corporations, as I've told you, we need to give corporate companies a little bit of a break. Now, you might say, oh my God, we're going to get a higher deficit. Initially, you will, but then you look at other opportunities. And the first opportunity is ensuring that this community taxing idea through legislation is taking effect over the next 4 to 8 years, because any kind of transition is going to take time. And currently, with this philosophy in Illinois, especially in the Chicago area, maybe even Urbana, we are driving corporations out of the state. And it doesn't do us any good to make the corporate taxes more, because they will leave. All right. So then we've got the replacement tax. Okay. Businesses also pay a personal property replacement tax on net income, etc. So in Illinois, they've made this really, really complicated. And we really need to look at how we're taxing businesses and corporations, and look for opportunities, like I said previously, to tax everyone versus this personal income tax on income, and then taxing into what I think is oblivion businesses in the state. All right. So, specialized tax groups. Now, the only reason I'm mentioning this is you do realize that in the next 2 or 3 years, there's not going to be much money coming from the federal government. Now, currently, retirees, Illinois is one of the few states that does not tax most retirement income, including Social Security distributions and public private pensions. Okay. But if I'm running for governor, my constituents would need to know that this could change. Remember, you have a super majority of Democrats in the legislature, and they're going to be looking for money. And I predict that Governor Pritzker, in his State of the State address, is going to start talking about that. Now, I'm not saying that he's going to target retirees. I'm saying that they're going to start doing some studies, because they're going to need money. Remember, the Chicago mayor doubled the taxes, the property taxes in the south side of Chicago. So they're going to be looking for money, and they're also running a deficit right now. Okay. So I hit that pretty hard, and I'm just saying that if I were running for governor, I would be talking about this, because those are the most important issues for Illinoisans, and affordability is the essence of what I'm talking about, because salaries are not going up that high in this state, and we just have more obligations. Now, something real quick, I did a search for how they were tracking undocumented workers. I kind of mentioned that earlier. And I can tell you, based on what I've read, there is a lot of theory from the state and modeling that they are tracking undocumented workers, and they gave a number of how much that they were paying in taxes. And I would submit to you, and you can go and look it up, that it is hard to believe that undocumented people in the state are paying taxes. First of all, it would have to be voluntary, because they would have to tell you that they were in the state and they were not documented. I don't think that they're going to tell their employers that. And remember, the law in Illinois supports them not telling you their status. So you can't report that they're undocumented if you just don't know. And then the other issue is the amount from the modeling, because it almost looked like that they were saying, well, Uh, we got a lot of them from companies that are roofers, and we're thinking that they are undocumented potentially. So let's grab some numbers from there. So they're grabbing numbers out of the air based on my analysis, and that's a hard sell. And so I would say that we need to audit that. We need to have processes. Now, I always say audits because that's how you send in someone independent and then you find out what's going on. Because it could be that employers, some employers, not all of them, don't care who you are as long as they can pay you a certain amount and then they can keep the bulk of the profits. So that part is just food for thought for folks. And so you can go and research that more. I will bring it up a little bit more here as I find out new information. Okay, so the House of Representatives in Illinois is back in session and they are talking about affordability. And what they want to do is they want to uh, have some kind of initiatives. They call it their priority of creating jobs, wage growth, and addressing the 2.2 billion budget shortfall without broad-based tax increases. Okay, so that's the study right there. Now, remember, the Speaker of the House of Representatives in Illinois is a Democrat. So they are already starting to get information and they have a 2.2 billion shortfall already. So you can guess what they're going to do. So stay tuned. I will let you know. They also want to decrease energy and utility bills. Um, Stay tuned for that. So at least they're thinking about it. Now, on the Republican side, all what they introduced was legislation to provide tax relief on tips and overtime pay and limit property tax increases for seniors. Now, they're in the minority. How much traction do you think that they're going to get on that? And in this part of the state, we need to be concerned. We've got lots of establishments that are hospitality. And wouldn't it be good if we could give the people working in those places relief on tips and overtime pay? And that would be what I would think would be the priority because the Speaker of the House, they are want to know how they can get more money to budget and pay for their obligations. And you know what their obligations are currently. And you also know that there has been a decrease of federal funds. So I will be talking more about that. But if you're voting this year, which you should do, please pay attention to these issues that the legislative body in Illinois is talking about. All right, so now you guys know that I got back on Tuesday. And so I did a podcast on Wednesday and I was talking about foreign aid again, giving you an update. And currently, the policy is on us keeping money in the country. And the only fact that I want to stress to you is that most of these initiatives are under an executive order from the President of the United States. And if we reach a point that the House of Representatives are doing these funding bills, one of the things that they could do is they could fund these. And that is significant because there were court cases. I think one of them even made it to the Supreme Court, asking the question if Congress funds foreign aid to this country, to a country, and then the president says, no, we're not going to give them that kind of money. What happens then? Do we go with what the president wants to do, or do we go with what the House of Representatives wants to go with? And foreign aid prior to January of 2025, we had a lot of money going out of the country. So please go check, do a little bit of research, stay tuned for me to talk about that, because that is an important issue if you're voting this year. And I think that it's very important to know, if you're voting, who you're going to get and what they're going to do. And also, the local elections are very, very important. And I've highlighted that too. So, this is Just Listen, hosted live. I'm George. Have a great weekend, and we will talk to you again on Monday.